Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Global Supply Chain Management class where we will be focusing on enterprise resource planning, more commonly known as ERP. And as you all know, uh, in supply chains, generally speaking, there is a widespread need for IT systems. And so, generally speaking, if we look at rather large companies and multinationals, companies that are working in more than one country to produce their goods, for example, there's the way they operate is primarily through robust IT systems. And most manufacturing concerns also nowadays, whether in locally or internationally, realize that there is a need to invest in IT systems. But the question is why? A lot of companies also feel there is an old school philosophy that feels that that thinks that this is a cost that can be saved, but by and large this type of ideology has been changing over the years. And the reason is, there are several reasons. One of the reasons is that supply chains in general are getting larger, more complex, and they are involving multiple players. In the first lecture in this class, we discussed globalization and how nowadays there are not very many tariffs. It's a lot more easier to import and export. Transportation costs have gone down, and the net result is that the supply chains span several continents now for products that are being made. So in order to manage all of this, it becomes very difficult to just rely on manual systems and phone calls. It's a lot more easier when you have an IT system. And and one of the reasons is that people can access data of what is going on with each one of the players, where the product is. They can track it, they can trace it, and this is extremely beneficial to all the players within the supply chain. Um, so another reason that IT systems nowadays have become very important in supply chains is that supply chains have become intertwined, and so whatever is happening in one supply chain impacts the other supply chain. For example, if you are making a good, you have a factory and you're producing something, and you're relying on certain components. If there is a supply chain issue in one of the components and you're not able to get your hands on one of the components, you may run into a lot of problems in manufacturing your product. And so this is an example of how supply chains nowadays have become very intertwined. So it's important for you, and I'm going to just follow through with the same example. It's important for you to have some visibility into the supply chain of the company whose component you rely on, and so that if there is an issue that maybe that coming up, you can preempt it, you can take proactive action and come up with an alternative solution. Another important reason for having IT systems, and this is perhaps one of the reasons that has a huge impact on companies, is that during decision-making time, it's very important to have the correct data and have common data, meaning one version of the truth. What you don't want is that there are several different numbers floating around, and you're sitting down and you're trying to make a strategic decision and you have absolutely no idea as to what data to go with and to rely on to make that decision. So that's another reason that IT systems are extremely important. Furthermore, let's think about another reason, which is that within a company, it's sometimes having a good IT system, robust IT system, helps you interact within the firm in a more efficient and effective way. It's quick, instantaneous. You can rely on quick emails, accessing information, and so on and so forth. Finally, the IT systems really help with communication. And this communication could be business to business communication. So, one company communicating with another company. It could be a B2C, meaning a business to consumer kind of communication, where businesses are effectively and easily able to communicate with their customers, and M to M, manufacturer to manufacturer. So these are just some examples, but in essence, robust IT systems also, have a very strong impact on enabling communication within an organization. All right, so the title of this entire lecture today is on enterprise resource planning. Several of you have heard of ERP, which is the short version for enterprise resource planning. And, ERP systems are something that there's this huge company called SAP, and many times ERPs are affiliated with SAP, and the reason is that SAP is one of the companies that really launched ERPs and has a first mover advantage, has excellent ERPs. But let's try and understand what exactly an ERP is. Many people have a good idea, but many times people are a little confused. So it's important for us to really understand and grasp what an ERP system is. So I'll read the definition out right now, and I'll also try and explain it to you once I'm done with that. All right, so an ERP system is a complex software system that ties together and automates all enterprise-wide basic business processes, right from taking orders to processing requisitions to monitoring inventory levels, financial accounting, and human resource management. So let me just repeat that in my own words. So in essence, what an ERP system is, it's basically a very complex software system. And what the software system does is it basically automates all the processes. Everything happening in a company gets automated, and the data for everything that is happening within the company is fed into this complex software system called an ERP. And the data that is entered in the ERP includes a lot of things. It includes, the information of orders, the processing of orders, the monitoring of processes, inventory levels, financial accounting, HRM. So basically, in effect, everything is fed into the ERP system. And in order for you to be able to have an ERP system, you have to have your business processes laid out in a way that it's easy for you to automate them and to input the information within the system. Furthermore, all business transactions are recorded in the enterprise-wide data format, and the right connected systems are updated to reflect each transaction. So one of the things to really know about an ERP system is that ERP systems, the information that is fed into the ERP system has to be fed in a very specific data format, and it has to be done regularly and updated regularly. And so if you really think about this, this is something that requires a little bit of technical information because you need to know the lay of the land. You need to know exactly what kind of format and how the system works and operates. So just to give you an idea, there are some people that get additional certifications, for learning how to manage ERPs and to run ERPs. And so that's just something for you to know. Okay, so now, okay, so that was all the definition, but usually for me, a good, picture or some sort of a graphic usually helps me understand any concept a whole lot better. So here are two, this slide is kind of divided in two parts. And in the first part, you see that each department is kind of independently functioning. So you have your HR, you have your production, sales, inventory, finance, distribution, and each one of these departments are running kind of independently. They have their own data. They are processing the data. They are doing whatever they're doing, and they're all kind of doing it in a little bit of a silo. And so the information that they have is just kept within the department. They don't necessarily, I mean, HR doesn't have a need to go to the sales department and tell them their information, and vice versa. Same with inventory. All of these departments just feel that, you know what, they're fine doing their bit, holding on to their information separately in each department. But on the bottom part of this page, there's a graphic over here, right over here. This picture depicts what an ERP does. And so what you see is they're all the same departments, but all of a sudden they are all feeding in their information into an ERP system. So as and when there's a sale, for example, the information is fed into ERP. Finance, once they're doing their accounting, their budgeting, all of that information, the costing, all of that is fed into ERP. Similarly, distribution, whatever the distribution, how it's going, what the routes they're using for transportation, fed in. HR, from everything from, including how many employees they're hiring, the onboarding process, the training process, all of that is fed into ERP. Production, how much is being produced, who, when, where, all of that. And same for inventory. And so all of this information is fed into this complex software system called ERP, right? And so again, I'm repeating that, they can't just sort of just throw in or dump in the information into the system, but in fact, they have to organize, each department has to organize their processes in a way and automate them in a way that it's easy for them to automatically, put in the information in the correct ERP data format and regularly update this. Okay, so that hopefully by now, after this explanation, you have a better idea of what exactly an ERP system is. Now, the next question is, what are the benefits? I mean, is it really such a big deal? I mean, everybody talks so highly about ERPs, and the question is it really something that does it that is worth giving so much of importance to? And so let's really in this slide talk about the benefits of ERP. And so hopefully by the end you'll be in a better position to answer whether or not what the benefits of ERP are, whether or not it's really worth it for any organization. So the first benefit of an ERP is that, if you have this system, if you decide to go and implement it or get an ERP for your or particular organization, you have to organize, codify, and standardize your processes and data structure. So your processes, and they have to be, standardized. So for ERP to work within your organization, this requires a little bit of work. I just, want to put it out there. But on the other hand, the benefit is that by sorting out your processes in the correct ERP way, they become a lot more organized and better, and usually more standardized, and it's just easier across the board. Secondly, because remember, just to finish that first point, just remember that globally there are certain ways and there are standardized processes. And so you are now going to be following the global procedures and processes. And so that is, effectively it helps improve the efficiency of the organization. The next benefit of ERP is that it takes these little bits and pieces of information all over the place and it puts it into one unified data repository. So one big bucket of information. So you don't have pieces floating around. It's all in one place. So, for example, if you don't have it, this kind of repository, and you have an employee and the employee is holding on to some critical information, all of a sudden the employee decides to make a career switch and you have no idea which computer that the sensitive information that they had is in, where it's stored. They may have just erased it by mistake, and that could cause a big damage to your organization. So having information regularly input into this unified data repository is a win-win situation for all involved. All right, the next benefit of ERP is that it makes data instantaneously visible and available for decision making across departments. I mean, this is a pretty understandable statement, but just to delve a little bit deeper. So the information that it's real-time information coming in. So if you're a key decision maker, you're a CEO, you're a CFO, you're even in mid-level management, you need to be able to make quick decisions many times. And you do not have the luxury of calling 6 people, waiting on information. If you kind of do those kind of things, sometimes the ship has just sailed and it's too late. And many times people end up making wrong decisions because they didn't have the correct information on hand. So this helps with making better decisions because it makes data instantaneously visible and available, right? Another reason is benefit of ERP is that it eliminates redundant systems and data. So this happens in many cases where there's extra data. There is data that's just not needed and is being collected. And what happens is that when you have that extra data, it leads to confusion. And again, you have no idea which is the correct version. So it helps with version control and basically reducing redundancy. Also, there are certain tasks such as data entry. Without having an ERP, many times this is something where you have to hire somebody just to collect all the data for you and hold on to the data and put it in the correct order. Well, once you have an ERP, you really don't need to rely on people. This is a non-value added kind of a job, being just data entry, and people can easily do this themselves. You do not need to hire specific people for data entry anymore once you have an ERP system. And you can take advantage of best practice standard process designs. And I kind of mentioned this in the beginning of the slide, where there are best practices for various standard process designs, and it's important to really take advantage of these because the information is out there. And not only do big companies that sell ERPs tell you how what the process designs are, but they give you some information on exactly how to go about redesigning them. Also, ERPs they allow more flexibility. And so once you have these, you start following the global standard procedures. Generally speaking, there is an increase in the level of flexibility within the various processes. All right, so that's a lot of advantages. It sounds like a pretty good idea after hearing all of these reasons and benefits of ERP. the question is, okay, if it's that good, then why doesn't everybody start using ERPs? What's holding organizations back? And so the first thing, perhaps one of the biggest reasons, is that it's expensive. It's very expensive. And the implementation and maintenance of ERP systems is very time consuming. It takes a long time to implement. And then even if you've implemented the ERP system, it's not enough. You have to maintain it regularly. Also, if you enter erroneous or data, or if there is an error in the information that is fed into the system, there is a ripple effect. It can, and it's many times replicated throughout the entire system. So there's really no room for making mistakes once you have an ERP system. Another thing is that, look, every company, sometimes companies do things in a different way. They may have a completely different, like maybe they're not following global processes, process designs, but maybe their design is somehow better, or it just works for them. Well, they no longer have the luxury of just sticking to the processes, designs that work for them. In fact, they are forced to change their processes. And sometimes this means decreasing their competitive advantage. Also, another drawback of ERP is that sometimes, there's a lot of reliance on the main vendor for critical systems. So you're relying on this very complex software system. And honestly speaking, once you have an ERP and you have, all of your processes linked into ERP, your company will not really effectively be able to work very well without the ERP system. So you're heavily reliant, and you're reliant on a vendor. So the subject, you may have some subject matter experts within your organization, but honestly, the end-to-end knowledge for an ERP system will be with the vendor that sold you the system. And so you're kind of relying on them for the functioning of even your most critical systems within the organization. Another important thing is that there is a shortage in general of people across the world with technical knowledge of systems. And so even, as I had mentioned a little bit earlier, there is, for example, SAP certification, but it's not like you can get a certification and you have subject matter knowledge of all the entire ERP system and how to use it. In fact, if you just, like I mentioned, SAP is like, a company that makes an ERP system. There are several others, but let's say you do get a SAP certification. It's just going to be for maybe one small area, or how to input the data and manage one small section of the ERP. And so there are many different, it's a very large, very complex software system. And so number one, it's expensive and difficult to learn it and know it. But on the other end, if you are actually an organization, then, and you plan on having and getting an ERP system, it's sometimes very difficult to find people with subject matter expertise in managing ERP systems. And sometimes they're very expensive resources for organizations. So, and one other thing to remember is, in terms of drawbacks of ERP, is that if the system shuts down for some reason, there is a wide impact on the entire organization. As I mentioned, it may be close to impossible for an organization that is heavily invested and relies on ERP to function if for some reason the system collapses. All right. Next up, let's look at the way ERPs, and these are for, across the board, generally speaking, how are ERPs, what are the key components? And over here, you can see that there are 8 core ERP components. The first one is, customer facing. So it's customer manufacturing. Next one is, sorry, customer management. And the next one is manufacturing. Third is procurement, or actually buying things. Fourth is logistics, which basically means the operational aspect of an organization. Fifth, product data. Sixth, finance. Seventh, asset management. And eighth is HR, or human resources. All right, now, a different way for us, now that we have a kind of a good overview of what ERPs are, the benefits of having ERPs, the drawbacks of having ERPs. So if you think about it, on net, it seems like a pretty good idea. Of course, but on, because it improves, access to data, all the different reasons we went through. Those are all the benefits. Net, very expensive and time consuming to implement, right? So that's, there are these huge benefits, but then there are also some very significant disadvantages. I wouldn't call them disadvantages, I'd call them more like challenges. And then, so most organizations have to weigh these two out. There are companies that have bought into it, and especially multinationals, that cannot live without it. And other companies, knowing ERP, all the benefits, decide that it's just not the right time for them. And generally speaking, as you can understand, ERPs are good for larger organizations. So they're not necessarily good for small or mid-sized companies. Okay, so that was kind of, I would say the first part of the lecture, and where, it was a big high level overview of ERPs. Next up, I'm going to be discussing a little bit about the different types of data within an ERP. So, we mentioned that, each department puts in data, but there are three categories of data. And so the three categories of data that is fed into any ERP system is, number one, organizational data. And this basically it focuses on the structure of the enterprise. And I'll go into more detail, but this is just a high level overview right now. So bear with me. So the first one, as I just mentioned, is the organizational data, representing the overall structure of the enterprise. The next kind of data that is fed into ERPs is master data. And master data, these are basically entities associated with specific processes. Okay, so this is data that's related to specific processes. Customer-related processes, vendor-related processes, material-related processes. So that's master data, and that information is also fed in that data, not information. That data is fed into ERPs. And the last type of data is the transactional data. And transactional data that's fed into the ERP system is basically, it's a result of executing some sort of a process. So once, let's say it could be, like, for example, you executed a process, you made a sale, and a receipt was generated. Well, that receipt is an example of transactional data that needs to be input into the system. All right, now I'm going to talk a little bit more about each one of these data types, and so that you can get a good overview. And if you ever happen to talk to somebody who's involved in ERP, you should be able to have a good working knowledge of what the kinds of data is within an ERP system. All right, so organizational data, right? And as I mentioned, this is basically, it captures the overall organizational structure of an organization. So it could be that this is a huge, huge group of companies, for example, or a multinational of some sort, and let's say it's a, Unilever or a Procter and Gamble or a Toyota or, a large company like that. Well, generally speaking, those kind of very large companies, they have, big companies within them. They have some subsidiaries. They may have some factories that they own, warehouses, storage areas, sales regions, and all of these things. And so this organizational data is where you kind of input all of these things. And so this is the high level organizational structure snapshot. And so when somebody, it basically gives the lay of the land of how this organization is has been structured. And it goes into various levels of detail. So on the client enterprise level, this is the highest level. And so over here, it's many times there is an enterprise of one or more companies or subsidiaries, right? So as I mentioned, this is on the high level. You're trying to see, are how is it laid out? Are there several companies under one group? Are there, within the companies, are there some subsidiaries underneath the companies? What is a general organizational structure? The next thing is the company level. And here you're basically trying to separate legal entities, but um, separate legal entities, but only belong to a single client or enterprise. So, again, on a company level, are there separate legal entities? Are they combined? What's going on? And on the plant facility level, again, what products are being manufactured where, what materials are being stored for distribution. So where are these factories? Generally, what are the plant codes? What are the factory codes? Where are they located? Which companies do they feed into? So again, hopefully you've understood that this is a high level organizational structure snapshot. And you really want to make sure that, end to end, all of the data, all the connectivities are outlined effectively. Okay, next up is master data. And master data basically represents all the entities used in processes. And so material master is the most commonly used. And so here, basically, different processes use materials differently, which adds to the complexity. And net, what you're trying to see over here is, look, there's several kinds of processes. For example, there are many different types of materials. So you have materials that come in, let's say, in work in terms of in raw material. From raw material, then there are various processes. So there's also a process of bringing in that raw material, and it has to be fed into the ERP system. Then once that raw material is actually in the organization, there are processes used to really work on that raw material and make something out of it. And so that's basically, once it's half made, or some processes have already been applied to the raw material, that's the half made kind of goods. Those are called the work in process. And of course there are finished goods as well. And so you need to, over here, be able to identify all of these and mention, all the different processes. So anything related to a process, which is a series of steps that work together with a end goal, or with a end goal, that's a process in general, right? So you need to, anywhere where there are any processes in the organizations, those need to be identified, and that information needs to be input and that's called master data. This kind of data regarding processes. Finally, the data that also needs to be fed into the system, the last kind, the third category of data is the transaction data. And this is the consequence of executing a business process. This is generally a combination of organizational, master, and situational data. And this includes transaction documents such as purchase orders, invoices, etc. Generally speaking, in ERPs, there are virtual documents that are internally generated, and those are used in ERP. Right. So here in the first slide, was the whole high level organizational. Here, the master data is basically data about every single process happening within the organization. And the transaction data information is basically like the receipts or the acknowledgement that, maybe you've sent something, let's say, to a different party and they've received it. Okay, great. Here's the invoice. Here's the receipt. And all of those kind of things have to be, fed into the system regularly. Now, again, this receipts, everything has to be in a certain format. So, just a receipt in any format cannot be just uploaded in the system. In fact, it has to be a virtual document. Right? Okay, so moving on from here now. Let's look at some of the what's going on in an ERP system now, right? So on this particular slide, it's very interesting because here we're seeing that in the ERP system there are certain inputs, and we just discussed all of those inputs in detail, right? These were the organizational data, the master data, the transaction data, and here there are just certain examples given in this slide for the inputs. Now, what happens after that? Because all the data is inside this system. Is that it? Is it just a data dump of some sort? Actually, no. ERP systems help organizations make good decisions. So there is this thing that is called MILP, right? And mixed integer linear processing. And so basically what this is there is this thing called optimization. And in supply chain management, when these kind of ERP systems, once the information is fed in, then they come up with, based on this, excuse me, they apply optimization and they come up with certain solutions for you. These solutions could, example of these is, okay, a transportation, a methodology of how you're supposed to, maybe run your time horizons for a single planning run. But more than that, it basically, for example, let me tell you, okay, so you feed in all the information, and then the ERP will tell you, okay, this is how much you should be producing. This is what your production should be over the next 1 month. This is the weekly schedule. This is the monthly schedule, so on and so forth. If you're looking at transportation, it will help you come up with transportation windows. All kinds of different decision making optimization. It's decision making is basically facilitated through application of optimization methods. And so this is very, very powerful. If I need to figure out a budget, an ERP system can help me with that. If I need to figure out the inventory scheduling, an ERP system can help me. A transportation management system, ERP system can help me with that. Salesforce, how many Salesforce? How should I go about it? What's the optimum number of people that I need to, have stationed at various locations? All of that, ERP systems help me do that. And again, how they help you do it is fed within this software uses something called optimization, and through that optimization this decision making is facilitated. Of course, once you get that information and it's no longer data and now you will have information that the system gives you the final call is you know the manager's call, or whoever is the high level management. Once they're looking at that information, then they can make very wise decisions. And those decisions would not be just based on flukes, they would actually be based on the data and the information available to them. And so specifically, I was giving all kinds of examples of the kinds of things that ERP helps generate. But let's look at some details over here. So demand forecasting and planning. We have, in a previous course, we study demand forecasting and how it's done. And so this is something that's automatically generated in ERP system. A production plan, as I had just mentioned just a little while ago, for the future periods, to allocation of production to plants. So, okay, how much needs to be produced, where? Allocation of orders to suppliers, right? So that's also very important. Okay, well, how many orders should I give, and to which suppliers should I give those orders to? Identification of bottlenecks or any problems within the organization is effectively done through the supply chain management and through this ERP system, excuse me. And root cause analysis. Again, if there is a problem going on, the system will identify the problem, and it will also help you or give you some very good indicators of what the root cause for those problems are. All right. So moving right along, next I will be discussing certain types of ERP systems that are very beneficial for in supply chain management. And so there are many different, as we saw, components of ERP. And so if you're planning on getting an ERP, you do not need to get the entire all 8 components. You can decide that you just need to get 1 or 2 or as many as you need to effectively function. So one kind of ERP component that is, as I mentioned, very beneficial in supply chain management is something called transportation management system. And this is a software that really facilitates procurement of transportation services, short-term planning of transportation activities, assets, resources, execution of transportation plans. And so this is important because many times, supply chains are, in various geographical locations, domestic, local, international, and also there are many different modes of transportation that are being used: ocean, air, rail, full truckloads, half truckloads, parcels are being used, private fleets are being used. So there are all of these various things, and you know what, they all need to be managed, and you also need to figure out many times what the best most what's the best way to transport your goods in a way that they are safe and also is cost effective. So again, a good transportation management system can help you do that. Just some more, if just for us to get a little bit more information on what exactly TMS or transportation management functions, what the core functionalities include. They include transportation procurement, mode and carrier selection. So, okay, which mode, meaning ocean, air, so on and so forth, and which carrier. So again, this system will help you, will give you an idea of who you should choose and how you should go about transporting goods. The carrier communication, routing, guide generation and maintenance, fleet management, audit, payment and claims, appointment scheduling, yard management, route planning. Again, these are huge in supply chain management, especially for logistics companies, right? So very, very important. All right. Now, another method another component of ERPs that's extremely valuable in supply chain management is warehouse management system. most factories, most organizations use, both of these: transportation, um, in terms of, logistics, and also warehousing. And so um, it's many times highly recommended for large companies to get a warehouse management system. And a warehouse management system is a software system that facilitates all aspects of operation in a warehouse, um, or distribution center, and integrates it with other systems. This is not the same as an inventory management system. Inventory management systems identify stock levels, replenishment policies, and all of that. So it's different. Okay, so this has a lot to do with, a warehouse is a place where things are left. A distribution center is a little different. So in a warehouse, your inventory is placed, it's stored for a certain period of time before it's sent out. It could be being sent out, if it's raw material, maybe it's going to be shipped over out to a factory where it's going to be processed. If they're finished goods, maybe they're going to be sent to customers. So it's different. And warehouse and distribution centers are different, because usually in warehouse, it's just more like a storage. Distribution centers, there's usually some sort of processing or packaging or some sort of value addition being done in distribution, to the products. So that's a little bit of the difference between these two. So anyways, let's now discuss the benefits of warehouse management systems. There's several. First of all, you will be able to see exactly what all you have in stock, and you'll be able to trace exactly where the stock is located. This also helps with labor productivity. So because in huge, large warehouses, there's a lot of work of picking things up and dropping them off. And so once you have a good warehouse management system, you can basically give this information. The system will basically help your employees to be able to find the quickest route and identify where things are placed within a warehouse. There are also a lot of there are less mispicks. Where mistakes effectively. There's also a reduction in the returns. Less goods are returned because the correct goods are shipped out. More accurate reporting is done if you have a warehouse management system. Improved responsiveness, data visibility, increased customer service, and less paperwork. So net, you can see that if you have this kind of a system, you are, a lot more efficient and effective. So efficient means you're doing things faster. Effective means you're not making that many mistakes. You're getting the net end result effectively. Okay. So now, what are the companies that are offering ERPs? Let's have a look at that. There are several. There is a company by the name of SAP, and that's SAP. As I've mentioned earlier in this lecture, that SAP is perhaps the most well-known ERP system manufacturer. And then there others are, Oracle, another very large company, JDA Software, Manhattan Associates, Epicor, and there so on and so forth. And so these are, as you can see, some companies offer all the different components of ERPs, such as SAP and Oracle. Others, not all of them. Some of them, and some just handpick for the rest of them. Okay. So, so that's kind of, again, a different, I would say the second section of this class is this particular lecture. I've just kind of winded up over there, which gives you, again, hopefully a high level understanding of ERPs, the best ones in terms of supply chain management, TMS, WMS, the benefits, and hopefully over the last couple of slides, you were able to really understand why the benefits of having these in an organization, and you know, you should be thinking along the lines of, hey, which organizations in Pakistan, for example, are actually using these um, systems. And so this is something for you to really think about, and maybe do some preliminary research online. Okay, now moving on. Okay, so let's say your company is in the market, and all of a sudden the senior management, you're working for a company, and the senior management says, look, we're pretty sure we want to get an ERP system. Okay. And we think that we want to, since we are a supply chain company, we really want to get some supply chain. From that end, we've been told that, WMS, TMS, these are really important. So look, we're a logistics company, we're a supply chain logistics company. So can you help us? Can you help us figure out what we should do in terms of getting an ERP system? Well, if you're going to go out in the market, you're going to find some pretty interesting things. First of all, there are going to be there's certain options in the market. One option is that you go to, let's say, SAP or Oracle, and you say, you know what, can you just start us off maybe with 2 or 3? We want to start off with getting WMS, TMS. Can you please implement those in our organization? And as time goes by, maybe we will want to add on and get many more ERP components from you. This particular strategy is called an ERP expansion strategy. And if eventually you can get all 8 of the different components, if that's something that is working very well for you. Another option is that you have ERPs built in-house. You hire, some software engineers, and you basically say, look, can you actually build something that's customized for us and for our organization? Can you build something out for us, please, within the organization? Now, there are going to be some benefits of this, as you can imagine, and I'll be discussing those disadvantages and advantages of each of these strategies, but just wanted to let you know that that's one option, right? Have it built in-house by certain software engineers. And the third option is that you get the best of breed. And basically what this means is that you go out in the market and you find out who has the best WMS, which company is offering the best WMS ERP component, and you go and you purchase it from that particular organization. Then if you decide that you want to get a TMS component for your ERP, then you go out in the market again and you do a comparative analysis, and you find out which organization has the best TMS software, and you go and you purchase it from the other company that is making the best TMS. And so you basically are going out and looking for, you're buying, in pieces, and you're looking for the best, for each component, whoever the best software company is, you're going for that option. So these are basically 3 different options that you're going to have. And, perhaps you're going to have to go back to your organization and let them know that, look, before I actually go out and I start doing some cost analysis, maybe we need to discuss what our overall strategy should be, right? And once I know the strategy, then I can move forward accordingly. So in return, perhaps your company would say, well, can you let us know what are the advantages and disadvantages for each one of these strategies? So let's start off and let's explore this a little bit. The first strategy mentioned on the slide is having an ERP system made in-house. You basically say, you ask some, so you hire some software engineers and you ask them to make an ERP system that is customized um, in-house. And so the advantage of this is that this is going to be made and customized according to your firm and the processes in the firm. The disadvantage of this strategy is that it is, of all the strategies, this is the most expensive strategy. It's also very difficult to maintain such solutions. It's very difficult and time consuming to develop. And this can result in a very inward looking approach. So, they may not be as effective outward looking wise, meaning the customer relationship component may be slightly weak. The supplier related component or procurement related component may be slightly weak. Okay, so let's look at the next strategy, which is ERP expanded solutions. And here, this is basically where you go to like a SAP or an Oracle and you say, look, we're going to buy one from you, maybe two components. And if things go well, we'll get more and more, we'll buy more and more from you. And we want to just work with one company. We do not want to work with many different companies. Now, the advantage of this is that ACE is faster than the other strategies. It's less expensive than having the software made in-house. It's efficient from an IT perspective, so it's quite efficient, and it's easier to upgrade than ERP enhancements. Now, so those are the advantages, right? You're working with a big company. So it's going to be efficient, it's going to be fast, easy to upgrade whenever you need an upgrade. But let's look in terms of the disadvantages. So again, if you're going to be working with this big company, they may ask you to restructure some of your processes according to, what ERP systems mandate, what they mandate. And so the other thing is that, look, generally speaking, these very large companies, they may, some components may be very good, others may not be the best in the market. So you know, at the back of your mind, you need to know that, look, you're not necessarily going to get the best of the best in every single component if you decide to go with this option. The next option is best of breed solution. And here again, you're basically going, this is very similar to the best of breed platform. And I'll explain a little bit of the difference over here. But the main thing is that you're going out and you're looking on a piecemeal basis for, whoever is offering the best component, and you're looking at each component separately. So again, the benefit is you're going to get the best market solution for each function, best of the best in the market, right? But what are the disadvantages? Maybe it could have slow performance. It may require additional software, middleware because for implementation. And if there is a problem, then there may be a ripple effect throughout. So the problem may get magnified. Also, the performance can be, is a bit slow, as I just mentioned, and difficult to integrate with different systems. So now it makes logical sense, right? I mean, if they're like if you have 8 different components from 8 different companies, 8 different ERP components from 8 different ERP companies, then it may be very difficult to integrate them and for them to work together as a whole. And again, the best of the breed platform is very similar to the best of breed solution. And so net, I think, the same advantages and disadvantages. So this is something, again, very important for companies, especially once they've decided that they do want to move forward with an ERP system. It's very important for them to figure out which strategy that they want to go with. Another option is that you say, look, we don't want to have an ERP, but we still want to get the benefits of an ERP. So you basically hire or outsource all of the ERP related work to a third party. And so this third party basically will come in and they will say, okay, you know what? You hire them and you tell the third party, look, I'm hiring you because we don't have the expertise to deal with all of this ERP business. Kindly please take care of all of our ERP needs. So this third party provider outsourcing option, basically somebody will come in, they'll run the software, they'll perform all the business processes, and this will eliminate the need for hardware and software. You don't need to then buy hardware and software and figure all of that out. The third party will do all of the work for you. And there are third parties out in the market and they have various fee structures. And this is the third party provider option is something that smaller firms usually use because they do need an ERP, but they realize that it's just too difficult for them to manage. They don't have the expertise. They don't have that kind of capital investment to invest in something like buying an entire component or several components. So many times they just reach out to a third party provider and say, look, we do have these ERP, we want to make certain decisions, we do want this information generated, so can you do it for us for a fee? Just 3 more slides left, we're almost done over here. So the question is, whether or not you should take this option of outsourcing and using a third party provider for using ERP. And so in this slide, there are and I don't want to go into too much detail, but so you can read this yourself. But net, I mean, if you outsource your ERP to, let's say, a third party provider, there are going to be certain privacy and security risks because these people are going to come in and you have to share all of your information with them. You're also going to be highly dependent on this third party provider. And you're not really going to develop any in-house expertise on managing this. So you kind of are going to be dependent for as long as you continue with this third party provider. Again, you may have certain concerns about availability, performance, and reliability of this third-party provider, data migration costs, etc., etc. Now, those are the disadvantages. The advantages of doing this using a third-party provider and outsourcing ERP is that you don't need to worry about investing in hardware and software. It's very flexible, agile. Generally, the costs are lower. And so you will have experts available. They may not be in-house, but you will be able to have experts from the third-party provider to come in to help you with the system. So that's we've covered quite a bit in this particular lecture. What I have over here now is software vendor selection process. So in general, we discuss various strategies that you can use, but still, if you want to decide that which company to go with, you're in the market. So these are certain steps identified in this particular slide that will help you select the right vendor and the right software in effect. So the first thing is you need to develop a project team. And you need to develop a team within the organization that's going to be, they're tasked with figuring out, okay, where are we going to get the software? We've decided what software, have we decided what software we're going to get? So understanding the needs and requirements, and then basically identifying, and actually getting the whole job done. So you have to form a team, and this team can have certain external people involved, but of course internal people, and you have to identify exactly what the objectives of this team is. Right? And then you need to understand the exact business needs. And once you know the business needs, then you can really effectively go out and look for the various vendors or the various ERP components in the market. And there are going to be a lot of needs and a lot of business needs for any company, but it's important to prioritize those needs and be able to understand what are the most important things that need to be addressed within the organization. And then once you know that, you can create you can generate an RFI, which is a request for information. So basically, in effect, you can go out and ask for information from various companies about what they can offer you. And then you can create a short list of potential people. You make a short list. Okay, well, this is all of the people, this is our needs. Now, based on our needs, okay, these are all of the potential solution and vendors that we can work with. Then you do an in-depth review of the shortlisted vendors, and you create a then you go ahead and you create a request for proposal. So once you get the once you identify and you shortlist the vendors, then you can ask for a request for proposal, which basically means you ask the companies to come in and make presentations and explain why you should go with them. And then once that is done, then you make the final decision. So again, starting with the project team, then you understand the business needs, identify the vendors, then you shortlist them, then you call them in-house, you go through the request for proposal process, and then you finally make a decision. This is, when you're actually going through and you have all these companies coming in and you're trying to evaluate them. This is an example of something called a scorecard. It's almost like you basically identify all the various options, all the people or the options that you have, the investment. So you kind of lay out all the different categories that you're going to be rating each company on, and then you grade them. And many times it's easier rather than giving numbers, because numbers can be a little bit tricky. So it's recommended many times to just give A, B's, and C's instead. So that brings me to the end of this ERP lecture, and I hope you enjoyed it. It's quite a lot of information, but a very interesting information. And this is information that's extremely useful and helpful for organizations. One thing I will say before ending this lecture, that one of the big things that is a big issue for a lot of companies is that there's a lot of fraud, and many times the numbers and especially accounting numbers are fudged up, and in order to for tax purposes or for other purposes. And the thing is, if you have an ERP system, you really can't do that. So once you do implement an ERP system, it also helps reduce fraud, reduce financial corruption in the organization, because it's very difficult to trick the system. And again, they're following, you have to follow the processes, global processes. You have to input data regularly. So it becomes extremely difficult to sort of trick the system. And this, in my opinion, is also one of the huge advantages of having an ERP. So I hope you enjoyed this session, and take good care. Thank you.